Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Victor Woodin and I will be your tutor for this course. In today's tutorial, I will be showing you how to build a blog with Django from scratch. So here is our blog. It looks pretty decent. When you click on a post, you're taken to the post detail. Clicking on the logo takes you back to the start page, and if you click no more, you are taken to my Facebook page. To participate in this tutorial, you need to have Python 3.8 or greater installed. Pip should also be installed. This is the package installer for Python. Pip will allow you to set up a virtual environment. The virtual environment allows you to isolate your Django installation so that if you create later projects and you have to upgrade, these upgrades will not break your earlier projects. You also need a text editor. For this tutorial, I'll be using PyCharm, but you can use the text editor that you are most comfortable with. It also goes without saying, but you should have basic Python programming skills as well as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Before we dive in, let me give you a background on Django. Django is a Python-based free and open source web framework which follows the model template view architectural pattern. In this diagram, we have client side and server side, and we can see that the Django framework's main focus is the server side. The Django template is on the client side and is responsible for rendering the information to be presented to the user. The Django framework is made up of the app logic, view logic, and model. The view encapsulates the logic responsible for processing a user's request and for returning the response. The model is responsible for structuring and manipulating the data of your web application. This data is stored in a database. In Django, an app is a self-contained package that does one thing or should only do one thing. In the case of our tutorial, the app logic is going to be the blog app in addition to the default apps that Django ships with. You can see the default apps in your settings.py file. In this tutorial, we're going to be working with the default admin app. A Django project is made up of the Django default apps along with any number of developer-created apps. In this section, we're going to set up the development environment. If you haven't already, download Python from python.org. Use the command line in Windows or terminal in Mac to install pip and install virtual environment. Then we are going to choose an editor. In your browser, go to the Python website and download the Python installer. Installation on Windows and Mac is pretty straightforward, so I'm not going to cover the installation process. Open the command line and type the following commands. Mac already comes with Python 2.7 by default, but to follow this tutorial, you will need Python 3.8. If you are successful, you should see Python 3.8.x, where x represents an integer. When you install Python, you already have pip installed. Pip is the reference Python package manager. It is used to install and update packages. Open the command line or terminal and type the following command to see if pip is installed. I have version 19.3.1 on my machine. If you have a later version, that is fine. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using PyCharm as my text editor. One benefit of using PyCharm over other editors is that I don't have to install additional extensions. I can just start coding. The community version is free to download, and that is what I'm going to use. Installation is pretty straightforward, and I will not be covering it in this tutorial. In this section, we're going to create the project folder, create a virtual environment, activate the virtual environment, install Django using pip, and open the project using PyCharm. Open the command line or terminal and navigate to where you would like to create the project. On the desktop, I have a folder named Dev where I store my Django projects. I'm going to navigate to this folder and use the mkdir command to create a folder named my_Django_website. Then I'm going to navigate to this directory. Inside of that folder, I'm going to create a virtual environment by typing the following commands. The virtual environment module comes pre-installed with Python 3. The name of the virtual environment is .env. The dot prefix ensures that this folder is hidden and doesn't get deleted by mistake. To activate the virtual environment, type the following command on Mac or Windows. This command should start your virtual environment. You will know if you were successful if the next line begins with the name of your virtual environment in parentheses. Use pip install Django, and this installs Django in the virtual environment. Open the project in your editor. On Windows 10, you may get a Windows Defender warning. Click Fix and select Configure automatically. In this section, we're going to create a barebones Django project, create a barebones Django app, discuss the project structure, and run the project on Django's built-in web server. I'm going to run the editor in presentation mode so that the text would be clearer and easier to see. Right now, the only folder in our project is the one that contains our virtual environment. On Windows, go into the settings, and on Mac, you need to go into the preferences and go to project. Click on Project Interpreter and click on the cogwheel to add an interpreter for the project. Select Existing Environment and make sure the interpreter is pointed to the Python executable file in the Virtual Environment Scripts folder. On Mac, this will be Python in the bin folder. Once this is done, you should be able to see all the packages that were installed and their version numbers. Also, when you open the terminal, you should be able to see that the virtual environment is running. Open a terminal and run Django admin start project my site period. The period at the end will cause the project to be added to the root folder. Without this period, the contents of the my site folder and manage.py will be placed in another my site folder. In other words, an extra folder would be created. When the project was created, it generated manage.py, which is a command line utility that lets us interact with our Django project. Later on, we'll be using that utility to make changes to the database and run the built-in server. Inside of the project folder, there is an init.py file which tells Python that this directory should be considered a package. Settings.py, as the name suggests, is where the project settings are stored. urls.py will indicate where the URLs for your website are located. asgi.py and wsgi.py are entry points for ASGI and WSGI compatible web servers, respectively. These web servers are used to help you serve your project. Run the command python manage.py start app blog. This creates a Django app named blog. This creates another folder which contains a migrations folder, another init.py file to indicate that this folder can be treated as a package, the admin module, apps module, models module, test module, and the views module. We will discuss them in more detail when we start to work with them. In the project folder, open settings.py. Since we just created an app, we need to add the name of the app to a variable named installed apps, which stores a list of all the apps in the project. Add the name of the app that we created as a string to this list. To avoid typing at the bottom of the screen, I'm going to open a new terminal. Run the command python manage.py migrate. This command looks at the installed app settings and creates any necessary database tables according to the database settings in the settings module and the database migrations shipped with the app. It only runs migrations for apps in installed apps, and you will see a message for each migration it applies. On refreshing the project folder, you should be able to see an SQLite database file. Run the command python manage.py run server, and this will start the development server at 127.0.0.1:8000. If you click on the link, you should be able to see a Django test page. In this section, we're going to create a database model, create a super user, log into the admin panel, and add data to the database. Open models.py, and you should see from Django.db import models, and we need to add another import statement. From Django.contribute.auth.models import user. Each model is represented by a class which subclasses Django.db.models.model. Each model is going to have attributes which are represented by variables. Each of these variables will represent a database field in the model. The second import statement gives us access to Django's authentication system user model. The model allows us to create users with any of these attributes, such as username, first name, last name, email, and password. We can now begin working on our model, and the first thing to do is create a tuple named status, which will be made up of a tuple for draft and another one for published. If the value 0 is stored in the database, this means the blog post is a draft. If 1 is stored, this means that the blog post has been published. Our model will be created like any other class in Python. The name of our class will be post, and it will inherit models.model. The title attribute, or the title field, will contain a string. Set it to models.char field. Set the maximum length to 200, as in 200 characters, and unique to true, because each blog post should have a unique title. For the slug attribute, set it to model.slug field. Set the maximum length to 200 and unique to true. If you are a little lost, you can always pause the video and read the documentation. Slug field is a subclass of models, so it seems like Django is a great language to use when creating a blog. For the author attribute, set it to models.foreignkey and pass in the user. For onDelete, set it to models.cascade, and for related name, set it to blog_post in single quotes. The foreign key is a relationship field. It is used for a many-to-one relationship. Think of it this way. One user can create multiple blog posts. It requires 2 positional arguments, the class to which the model is related, and the onDelete option. OnDelete can be set to cascade, protect, set null, set default, set, or do nothing. Cascade will delete the object containing the foreign key. The related name is the name to use for the relation from the related object back to this one. For updated on, set it to models.datetime field and set auto now to true. Set content to models.text field. Set created on to models.datetime field and set auto now add to true. Set status to be models.integer field. Set choices to status and set the default to 0. The model can have an inner class which contains metadata. Metadata is anything that's not a field, such as ordering options. We're going to order these posts by the dates they were created on. Other ordering options include database table name or human readable singular or plural names. The last expression is known as a Python magic method, and it returns a string representation of any object. This is what Python and Django will use whenever a model instance needs to be coerced and displayed as a plain string. In terminal, run the command python manage.py make migrations. This command tells Django that you have made changes to the models that were defined, or in this case, created a new one. These changes are saved in a file in the migrations folder. Run python manage.py migrate to migrate the change into the database. The admin app is installed by default in Django. Just add a / followed by admin to reach the panel. In order to log in, we need to create a super user. Run python manage.py create super user in the terminal. This will ask you for a username, which can be left blank, an email address, and a password, which must be entered twice. There is even password validation, which you can bypass. When finished, click Y to create a super user. Log in with the credentials that you just created, and you'll be taken to the Django administration panel. you'll notice that we cannot see the model that we created. We have to register the model in the admin module. Open the admin module and add this import statement. A period is placed before models because the admin module and the models module are in the same folder. Type admin.site.register and paste in post. Return to the browser and refresh the page. You should now be able to create a post and store it in the database. At this point, you won't be able to view the blog post because we haven't configured the front end of the blog. Right now, the admin panel looks very plain, but it can be customized to show more information about each blog post. Create a class named postAdmin, which inherits from admin.modeladmin in the admin module. The fields of this class will contain the options you want when you register a post. List display will contain the column titles of the database table that you specify. So we'll have title, slug, status, and created on. Set list filter to be a tuple even though it only contains a single value, status. Search fields will contain a list and we will be able to search for blog posts by their title and content. Pre-populated fields will be set to a dictionary where the key is the slug and the value is a tuple which only contains one value, and that is title. We next need to register post admin. We're going to have to place the post declaration above registration. When the browser is refreshed, you should be able to see the column headings for each post. Congratulations on making it this far. This was the hardest part of the tutorial. In this section, we're going to create view functions to display pages, customize URL patterns, create templates, and use for loops to iterate over the data. Patterns are repeated when building web pages. A blog contains a list of blog items, and clicking on a list item can take you to a details page. You can observe this pattern on a shopping website like Amazon. If you click on an item, you're taken to a details page, which would have information like the price and availability. In Django, list view and detail views are built into the generic class. Open views.py and type from Django.views import generic. We also need to import the model. Create a class named postList, which will inherit from generic.listView. We're going to use querySet to define a filtered list of objects. Create a variable named querySet and set it to post.objects.filter and filter by status and order the query by created on. For the template name, we will need to reference the name of the template that will be used to create this page. Create a class named postDetail, which inherits from generic detail view. For the model field, set it to post, and for the template name, set it to the name of the template that will be used to create the details view page. Create a new file in the blog folder. Name it urls.py. This file will be used to map the URLs for the views that we made. Import the views module and import path from Django.urls. URL patterns is going to store a list which contains the URL pattern for each web page in the blog app. Each URL pattern should be unique. The path function that we're going to use can take 4 arguments, but only 2 are required. Root and view are required, but keyword arguments and name are optional. For the first pattern, the root will be an empty string. The view argument is going to reference the post list function we created earlier, and we're going to use the asView method because the Django code is expecting a function and not an object. The name parameter is not required, but it is good practice, especially as your website grows. For the second pattern, we're going to use an expression that is enclosed by angle brackets. Django uses angled brackets to capture the values from the URL and return the corresponding post detail page. Slug: is known as a converter type, and it's used to capture a slug parameter. Open urls.py in the project folder. Expand the import statements and add include next to path. This imports the include function, which slices the URL string and sends part to URL config for processing. All of the app-specific URLs have been defined in urls.py in the blog folder. We have to tell Django about urls.py that we created. So we need to add this line to the project-wide urls.py. In other words, we're telling Django to search for URL patterns in the file urls.py in the blog folder. Now that the URLs have been mapped, it's time to create the templates. Open settings.py and create a variable to store the location of the templates directory. This directory has not been created as yet. It's best practice to store the templates for a particular app in a folder with the same name as the app. Scroll to the template section and enter template dir in the directories section. Right-click on the blog directory and create a folder called templates. Create a folder named blog inside of templates. Inside of this folder, create base.html, index.html, post_detail.html, and sidebar.html. Base.html is going to be a template which the other web pages will inherit from. Most web pages repeat a pattern, and rather than repeat this pattern over and over for each web page, we can use a template. Copy the Bootstrap CDN and place it in the head section of the HTML file. The CDN can be obtained from getbootstrap.com. Add a title tag, and below that, add a viewport meta tag that will make the website mobile friendly. You can customize the page however you like with CSS. You can add the CSS between the style tags. Go to bootstrap.com and you can copy the HTML for a navigation menu. Since this tutorial is about Django, you can copy the code from my GitHub page. In Django, a template contains variables which get replaced when the template is evaluated and tags which control the logic of the template. An expression or variable can be placed between two sets of curly braces. For example, the blog.title can be evaluated in this way. A tag is enclosed between curly braces and 2% symbols. It can be used with control flow, such as in a for loop, to load external information. At the bottom of the nav bar, open a block tag. A block tag can be filled by child templates. It tells the template engine that a child template may override those portions of the template. We'll add a footer, and this completes base.html. Open index.html. We need to use the extends tag and extend base.html. When the template system evaluates this template, it first locates the parent, which is base.html. At this point, the template engine will notice that base.html contains a block tag and replace the block with the contents of the child template. The content of index.html will be placed between template tags. To open the tag, type block content. You can add your custom CSS between HTML style tags. The header will contain an H3 element which says welcome to my blog and a paragraph element that says I love to code, hope you do as well. The blog entries are going to be placed inside a row div, and that div is going to be placed inside of a container div. Inside of each row, there's going to be a column div. As mentioned before, template tags can be used when we have expressions that we want to evaluate. A for loop can be used to iterate over all the items in the database. For each item, we're going to create a card div. Each post title can be evaluated by placing post.title between two sets of curly braces. The post author and the date each post was created can be accessed in a similar way. Next expression will access the first 200 characters, spaces included, of a post content. When you click the Read More button, it will take you to the post details page. End the for loop by typing N4 inside of a template tag. Inside of the row div, we're going to add a sidebar. Open the block with block sidebar. Type include blog/sidebar.html and end the block by typing nblock sidebar. Close the content block by typing nblock. Open postdetail.html. Again, we have to extend blog/base.html. Open another block content. Create a container div, and inside of this div, add a row div. Place a column div inside of the row. Inside of this div, we will place a card, and this will hold an H1 element. Create a block that will hold the title of the post object. Create a paragraph element that will contain the name of the author that created the post and the date the post was created on. Create another paragraph element that will contain the content of each post. We're going to use this expression to add a sidebar to the row div. Now we can end the content block. The sidebar is going to be a column, and inside of this column, we're going to add a card. An H5 element will contain the card header, and a paragraph tag will contain built with Django. Finally, I will add a link to my Facebook page. End the sidebar block. Before we try to load the page, in views.py, I have the wrong template name for post detail. It should be post_detail.html. The blog is finished and it looks beautiful. This blog can be improved. The about, policy, and contact links do not work as yet. The admin panel can be customized further, and we can even use a different type of database. There are many more things that can be done. Please subscribe for more tutorials.